Right.
I think that we often have definitions of cultural competence and we stick with those definitions, but what I believe is that cultural competence really takes a very deep, clear understanding of oneself. Because over the years, we've developed a pretty specific belief structure, and unless we understand how much that influences our behaviors and how difficult that belief structure is to change, because it is very deep-seated, we will never be able to see another belief structure that has also taken years to develop. So it really begins with oneself, and it takes a lot of critical, analytical thinking. If that's not happening, I don't believe a person can be culturally competent.
That's good, and you said it perfectly. You know, it does begin with understanding who we are, and as health professionals, understanding the rules and regulations and norms that we've been taught about what is appropriate and what isn't, and how to respond in a particular situation. And one particular example that I think we actually put in the book was from a medical anthropologist who was working with Cambodian refugees many years ago in the Dallas area, and what I learned from him. And he gave the example of a Cambodian refugee family whose child was sick. It was a young little girl who was probably school age, maybe kindergarten, first grade, somewhere in there. And they practiced the ritual of coining. And that ritual is that a faith healer takes a coin and through a ritual ceremony actually scrapes the coin along the child's chest and arms. And I'm not sure that I fully understand the purpose of all of that, but my understanding is that it helps to release spirits and other issues and other humors perhaps that they believe caused the illness. Well, this young child went through this ceremony. The parents lovingly took her through this ceremony, felt as though she was feeling better, sent her to school, and the authorities who saw the scraping on her skin automatically assumed that there was some child abuse involved and that CPS became involved at that point, and the child was removed from the home. The medical anthropologist was called in to explain that this was a really loving family that was doing what they believed was correct to help heal their child, not the opposite of that. So understanding that our assumptions and situations can be wrong because of our own personal perspectives and beliefs. So competency is exactly what you just said, Dr. Ward. It's understanding who we are, but coming into a situation where we're not sure that we're understanding the whole thing and backing up, backing up and saying, wait a minute, what do I not understand about this situation? Developing trust and understanding and an appreciation and respect for another culture takes time. It takes long amounts of time that aren't always available for instance, medical professionals who see a patient for the very first time and only have a short amount of time to give them some information that they think that would help improve their health. So I could talk forever about cultural competence.
I just wanted to add one more example. We all have learned, we all have growth to make in this area. Just an example of that is I've been working on a big project that's across the state of Texas, and one of the pieces of that was to do interviews with individuals who are eligible for food stamps, so that means that they're very low income individuals. And a lot of the individuals in the south part of Texas speak only Spanish. And so we were there to do our interviews with our bilingual educator who could translate for us. And one gentleman pulled me aside and he said, I really want to speak with you in English. I prefer English. I do better with English, but everybody assumes that I speak Spanish. And I realized immediately that I hadn't grown enough yet, because I assumed that he would want to speak Spanish.
As you brought that up, is many years ago when I was teaching in public schools, I made a huge mistake in misinterpreting the lack of eye contact with a student who had misbehaved in a classroom. I was not a happy camper, and I was giving him all kinds of instruction about what I expected in the classroom, and all during this conversation he was avoiding eye contact with me. And from my cultural roots, lack of eye contact is a sign of disrespect. So the longer I spoke, the longer we took in terms of him not giving me eye contact, the more frustrated I became. I ended up sending him to the principal's office, and that student was expelled from school because of lack of his disrespect, lack of respect. And then I realized later, when I learned more about his culture, that he was doing just the opposite, that he was showing respect, and I misinterpreted it. So communication, just the way we're taught that is normal and how to interpret different communication approaches, can create some major barriers for us as health professionals.
Well, I've asked Dr. Ward and Dr. Doyle to share some insight as veteran health educators, and they're pioneers in the field, and you'll see their dossiers that I put up on the web. They have contributed much to our field, and I asked them to share with you in summary a little bit about advice for you as new entry-level health educators, and also as new health education students, how you can begin to prepare. So Dr. Ward, if you wanted to start.
One of the most important responsibilities you'll have as a health educator is to advocate for health and advocate for people to learn as much as they can about health, and to be a resource person about health education. And I think that you need to realize two things in order to be an advocate. You need to know what you know, and you need to acknowledge and believe that you do know some things, but you also need to know what you don't know and be willing to get help and to learn. You cannot stop learning once you finish a class or your degree. You have to understand that you need to continue to learn and go about getting that education, that continuing education. Because one of the things I think we do a lot is get stuck in a job and forget to continue to grow. So if you're going to be an advocate, you have to continue to learn, I think.
That's great. And adding to that, you just talked about continuing to grow. I often tell students, take your hat off that says you're a student and put a hat on that says, I am a professional today. I am a health education professional in the making today. So what am I going to gain from this class that will actually add to my experience and my maturity and my perspective on who I am now and who I am becoming? And I think you just said that, Dr. Ward, is that you never stop thinking that way. So every class project shouldn't be just something I do for a grade. It should be, how experienced am I going to be when I finish this project? Right. What am I going to be able to say to a potential employer and to the whole profession about my abilities based on that? So I would just say, just what Dr. Ward already said, start today becoming a professional and realizing that this is a lifelong growth process. To be an advocate, you have to know what a health educator does. You need to know those 7 areas of responsibility and embrace them and say, I may not be an expert in all 7, but this is what I know so far about those. So learn from your university professors while you're in the program, capitalize on that. Gain real-world experience through your projects as much as possible now. Build up your resume as you go through. And after you graduate, or should I say, while you're still in school, join those professional organizations as a student and continue to be involved as a leader in those organizations after you graduate. We all have to stay connected. It's a basic philosophy of our profession for us to stay connected. We do move in communities. And so I just say, make sure that you're already a part of that community starting right now.
Okay, and we have a really important postscript from Dr. Ward.
Well, one of the things that I remember from school was that getting A's was extremely important, and now I realize that it's not whether you get an A or a B, it's how much you learned, which is exactly what Dr. Doyle was talking about. It's your responsibility to learn what that project was all about so that you can become the best professional possible. So forget about whether you get an A or a B and learn what it was, the target of that project or that class.